Welcome to my channel. I'm Chastity and this is Corporate Audacity, a channel where we discuss the audacity of corporations, the perils and triumphs of working in the corporate world. In today's video, we take a deep dive into the phenomenon that is remote work. Several people have asked about my experience working remotely, so I decided to create an informative video series on the topic of remote work. I've worked in the corporate world for almost 20 years now, and I've worked remotely on and off for the last 10. I began working from home in 2013, before it was sexy, and before there was a global health crisis causing a shift in the way we work. So in this multi-part series, we'll discuss the facts, the pros and cons, and some of my own personal experiences with remote working to help you make the best decision for you. But this is only part 1, so make sure you subscribe and get your notifications for parts 2 and 3. Let's dive right in. I'm sure you've seen the endless articles, videos, and advertisements about remote work, many offering the best, most flexible, no experience needed, high-paying positions that you can work from home. Now, I'm not knocking these creators or videos. Some of them I have watched and subscribed to myself. However, I believe it's necessary to get the facts about the availability of these jobs, the experience needed, some of the company's criteria, and the real day-to-day work life of a remote worker. A few of the videos and articles do give a good picture of what remote working really looks like, but you won't likely see as many of those at the top of your feed. Instead, you will find many videos glorifying remote work and offering a fairy tale narrative of what remote working is. Seeing a video about one highly specialized remote position and you're one of 10,000 subscribers to see it and apply doesn't give you really good odds of even landing an interview for this position. The reality is that these jobs are not as prevalent as they used to be, and I'll explain why. So let's get into the facts. The fact is, I'm an advocate for remote work. As I stated in the introduction, I've worked remotely on and off for the last 10 years. But it's important to note that the corporate landscape continuously changes as our world evolves or devolves. Some of those changes can be due to modifications in the laws, changes in leadership, unemployment rates and job availability, the stock market, or most recently, a global health crisis. On May 11th, 2023, the federal government declared the end of the public health emergency that initially shifted most of the country's corporate workforce from in-office work to remote work in 2020. This announcement has caused many employers to begin moving their staff away from fully remote work and begin implementing hybrid or 100% in-office work schedules. As you can see, the job postings have changed from a majority being remote positions just a couple of months ago to now a majority of positions listed as hybrid, on-site, or 100% in office. I just did a generic search on LinkedIn for analyst positions in the United States. Weeks ago when I did this search, most of the results were remote positions. As you see now, the results have changed to mostly on-site and hybrid positions. Now, this alone should not deter you from seeking a remote position or thinking that remote work is completely a thing of the past, because it's not. But it is imperative that you know what you're up against. So let's get into the pros and cons of remote working. I'll start with the pros. Probably the most appealing reason for me to work remotely is the ability to dress casual. And I mean super casual. Sweatpants, pajamas, anything with an elastic waistband. Hell, even a bathrobe. Been there, done it, felt great about it. No more ironing, no button downs, and too tight khakis. The next pro is the commute. No longer do you have to spend 30, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours on the road driving to and from the office. I've done the lengthy commute before, and there's nothing pretty about it. My corporate office was in a location that most of the staff could not afford to live in, except for the higher-ups. So many of us lived in the suburbs, further away, with cheaper housing, and that was a good distance from the office. creating a lengthy commute. Therefore, more money was spent on gas and car maintenance. But the time it takes you to go from your bed to your laptop can be your new commute time when you're working from home. So what would you rather have, a 1-hour commute or a 2-minute commute? I choose the latter. It's a no-brainer. The next pro is childcare. This is a big one for parents. When working in the office, if your child is sick or the school is closed, either the parent would have to take off work to care for their child or pay a sitter to keep the child. But with remote work, children can stay home and still be cared for by their parents. It's not always easy to do because sometimes children interrupt the workflow. But most managers are used to this and offer grace, as many of them have children as well. The cost of aftercare is usually eliminated too, as many people typically live closer to their kids' school than they work. So they can take a quick break to pick up their child from school and be back at their computer in no time. Working through illness is also a big deal, and employers seem to love this one. In fact, this pro will actually end up in the cons section later in the video. Working remotely has almost eliminated the need for people to take sick days. I've literally seen people on video calls attending the meeting from their bed. I myself have had to take a nap during my lunch hour because I wasn't feeling well, and then went back to work right afterwards. Everybody comes to work sick when you're working from home. This would totally be frowned upon when working in the office, though, because you would likely spread your little germs to everyone in the office and create a domino effect of illness. Which brings me to healthier diet and exercise. I enjoy being able to make myself a nice healthy omelet for breakfast or baked fish for lunch when I'm working from home. It's not that you can't have baked fish in the office, but it's seriously frowned upon. Instead, we tend to grab a frozen meal if we're being cheap or go out for fast food if we don't prepare a lunch beforehand. Many of us tend to live in suburban areas that offer walking spaces, which make it a little easier to get out and walk when working from home. The last office I worked in did not have a gym, and there was no walking area other than the parking lot. But at home, I had exercise equipment and was able to work out on my lunch break and take a shower, then get right back to work. Remote working is truly a haven for introverts. If you don't like being around people and like to stay home all day in your own silo, remote work is definitely for you. And if your job doesn't require you to turn on your camera and show your face, you'll never ever have to be seen again. Just sit there, do your work, and live your introverted life. The very best aspect of working from home is that you can work anywhere in the world. Sometimes. There's a caveat there because some employers make their workers hardwire into a company-paid internet line, or their VPN only works in certain regions. But for the most part, you can work anywhere that has a Wi-Fi connection. This makes it easier to go check on elderly parents, go to a vacation destination or resort, or just get out of your house for a while and still get your work done. I've done each of these things while working remotely, but as you might guess, it's not all roses. So let's get into the weeds and talk about the cons. The cons of remote working, and there are many, may not be what you think. So we're lifting the veil of remote work and showing you the not so good side as well. You'll have to decide if these are really things you would endure just to work from home. Number 1, most leaders don't like remote work. Number 2, 24/7 availability. Number 3, less paid time off and lower pay. 4, higher taxes and health insurance premiums. 5, monitoring or spying. Number 6, higher utility bills, power outages. Number 7, inaccessible corporate perks, discounts. Number 8, no water cooler talk. 9, coworker stealing. And number 10, being on display. Now this list could be a lot longer, but these are the big ones that come to mind. And because I want us to go more in depth about each subject on the list, this video will have to be broken down into a few parts. I don't want it to be too long and lose your attention. So let's dive right into number 1. Number 1, Many leaders do not like remote work, period, unless it's them. They have no problem with working remotely themselves and taking a 2-hour golf lunch or calling into their meetings from their resort in Cabo. We can literally see the hotel bed and decor in your Zoom background, Dan, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But I think your subordinates should be able to do the same, as long as they're getting their work done. However, many CEOs don't see it the way I do. Elon Musk recently said in an interview that, quote, working from home is morally wrong, and is shifting his staff back into the office. Apparently, he believes that, even though you're being productive, you still should not be able to work remotely. But that's not what his tech workers were promised. They literally do their jobs from a laptop, Elon. Why do they need to be in the office? Well, I'll tell you the answer to that later on in the video. And it's not just executives in the US who feel this way. Nicole Duncan, CEO of a commercial property group in Australia, says that she thinks that this generation of workers is selfish, and long commutes are no excuse for staying home and working remotely. Duncan says she spent years, quote, schlepping to the office on public transport and believes today's workers should do the same. This reminds me of the old boomer stories of, I walked 5 miles to the school in the snow with no shoes, so why should you get to ride the bus? Honestly, there are a lot of leaders who agree with Duncan and Musk. I met a lot of resistance from my leadership team when I wanted to go back to working from home in 2019. I was told that productivity would wane, and the company was just not set up for remote work. Well, guess what happened a few months later in 2020? You guessed it, a global pandemic. And they quickly implored us to take our laptops home and work remotely so that production didn't stop. What they found a few months later is that people were more productive and worked longer from home. We continued to meet and even exceed our goals. They basically said, we don't want you working remotely when it benefits you, but you can do it when it benefits us. So don't be surprised if you're met with a lot of resistance and the constant threat to push you back into the office when you're working from home. I'll link these 2 articles in the description below. Number 2, 24/7 availability. Sure, you may have an 8 to 4:30 work schedule initially, but working from home tends to entice management to push those work hours and days out a bit. They may say, hey, we have a project to do on Sunday. Do you mind logging in? It should only take a couple hours. This is something they typically wouldn't ask an employee to do who works in the office, but it seems palatable for remote workers. Next thing you know, you're working 6 or 7 days and 50 hours a week at the boss's discretion. Never agree to even 1 day outside your normal schedule. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile, trust me. Some remote workers are tempted to log in at night or early in the morning to get additional work done, something they wouldn't normally do if they were working in the office. One person tweeted that, quote, we're not working from home, we're living at work. And honestly, that's how it's felt over the past few years. You don't feel like you're de-stressing and getting away from the office because you're actually living at the office. If you are the type of worker who needs to completely disconnect from work for sanity purposes, remote work may not be your cup of tea. Let's get into number 3. Less PTO and lower pay. This is a big deal to me. Some employers have decided that because an employee works remotely, they should get less vacation time, less sick time, and even a lower salary. They believe in their hearts that working remotely is the highest privilege one can have bestowed upon them, and therefore they should accept less in terms of benefits and pay. In actuality, an employee working from home saves the company money on renting and maintaining office space. So why should you lose money? Vacation time is money, health insurance is money, and sick pay is money. I didn't realize this until I started a remote position at the height of the pandemic. When the company sent over my offer letter and explained the PTO and benefits package, it was just a straight 2 weeks vacation. I assumed That was just what the company offered to all its employees. Boy, was I wrong. After I began working there, I found out that my colleagues who worked in the same state of the corporate office and worked there pre-pandemic received an entire week more vacation time and an additional week of sick time. The time off policy had changed to not offer any workers that were employed after March 2020 any sick time and reduce the amount of vacation time those employees would receive. I guess employers decided that if you work from home, you don't need sick time and you can just work while you're sick. And that's what many of them expect now. I also started noticing that the pay for remote jobs I had applied for was significantly less than the pay would be for the same position working in the office. Some recruiters would even inform me that XYZ pay was the best they could do for a remote position. I actually ended up making less money during my remote time than I did working in the office. Even though the cost of living increased significantly in the past couple of years, the wages did not keep pace, especially for remote workers. When you work remotely for a company in a different state, you have a completely different health insurance plan than the in-state workers. So I'll explain in the next slide why your health insurance costs more. Number 4, higher taxes and health insurance premiums. Working remotely for a company who's in a completely different state may seem enticing, but it comes with a lot of extra costs to the worker. One is higher income taxes, and the other is health care. Sometimes the recruiters don't even tell you about the health insurance plan for the remote worker. They only tell you about their traditional plans. So I'm letting you know now. When you work remotely for a company in a different state, you have a completely different health insurance plan than the in-state workers. The in-state workers are likely offered a discounted plan to see in-network healthcare providers within their state, as the company has contracted with those providers or local health insurance plans that contract with those providers. The out-of-state workers don't have the option of seeing those contracted providers and therefore cannot access the discounted plans. So if you live out of state, you may have to pay more for health care. More money comes out of your check each pay period, and typically your out-of-pocket costs, such as copays and deductibles, are higher too. But if that isn't enough, you can also pay double the state income taxes depending on where you live. How is this possible? Well, I'll explain. In Connecticut, Delaware, Nebraska, New York, and Pennsylvania, employers withhold income tax based on where the employer is located. So if an employee is located in a different state, they must pay the income taxes in the state they reside in, as well as the state their employer is in, if it's in one of the aforementioned states. It's called a convenience rule. If an employee chooses to work from a different state out of convenience, they have to pay both states' taxes. If you reside in a state that does not have a state income tax, you would only be liable for your employer's state income tax. So to sum this up, your salary may be less for working remotely, and then your take-home pay can get eaten away by higher taxes and health insurance premiums. I know from experience. I worked for one of those states with a convenience rule, and I ended up having to ask for an increase in my salary. And it still wasn't enough. If you'd like to read more about the double taxation scenario, I'll link the article in the description below. Number 5, monitoring or spying. Yes, this is a thing. And it was actually a thing before 2020. The spying technology just got better and became more widely used. With the quote-unquote privilege of remote work comes the insatiable desire for employers to see what you're doing at all times. They want to make sure you're working and not just sitting there watching YouTube videos. Some of these employers want to watch their employees so badly, if they could fly a drone over your house, they would. When I first began working from home about 10 years ago, I worked for a company who was in the top 10 of the Fortune 500, who installed monitoring software on the laptops of all employees who worked a production-type job. These were mainly low to mid-level non-supervisory positions. This software had the ability to capture and record your computer screen and your keyboard and mouse clicks at all times. So management could review any long periods of idleness to see what you were doing. It became a game of moving your mouse and tapping your keyboard every few minutes so you don't seem idle, even if you're reading something or on a phone call. I still unconsciously do this, even when I don't need to. You just become a robot. Some employers also require you to stay logged into a messaging application like Microsoft Teams so they can see when you are showing available or away. They also want to have daily stand-up calls to see who's working and force people to turn their cameras on during Zoom or Teams meetings, making sure everyone is actively participating. There are employers who have written these monitoring processes into their human resources policies that you must agree to upon hire. Now, I'm not naive. I know there are people who don't want to work and will figure out a way to get away with not working. But guess what? Those people did that when they worked in the office too. They took long breaks and lunches, hung out in the break room, watched videos on their phone, and left early a lot. Those behaviors are specific to the person and not the environment. But many employers don't get that or even care. So everybody gets a short leash. If you don't like being closely monitored and constantly monitored, or attend meetings just so your manager can see your face, a lot of these remote jobs may not be for you. As you can see, we're not even close to being finished with this list. There are 5 more cons of remote working that I'd like us to discuss. So stay tuned for part 2 as we delve into number 6, higher utility bills and what you have to do when there's a power outage. Make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so we can continue the conversation. Also, let me know in the comments about your own experiences with remote work, as they may be completely different from my own. Either way, I'd like to hear from you. And remember to share this video with others who may be interested in this topic. This is Chastity with Corporate Audacity. Thanks for watching.